I saved a man's life and I never saw him again. 10 years have passed and it's still the craziest thing that's ever happened to me. But as it turned out later, that day by the pool was just the beginning of a chain of events that followed me for years, picking up strange coincidences, mysteries, and even a few small miracles along the way. Sometimes I wonder if there was some higher meaning to it all. Or maybe it's just my habit of looking for order in chaos. It all started back when I was in high school. To earn some pocket money and avoid bugging my parents for cash, I got a job as a lifeguard at a country club in our town. It was an easy gig, not exactly my dream career but way better than flipping burgers or mowing lawns. The club was exclusive, members only, and my main job was to memorize names and nod along to their small talk. "Good morning, Mr. Garrity," I'd say with a practiced smile, and he'd mumble something about millennials not knowing what real work is. I got used to that background noise and even found it kind of soothing. My spot was at the diving well, a lifeguard chair 8 feet off the ground with a perfect view of the deep end. I'd sit there with a red buoy on my lap, wearing sweat-soaked shorts and a cap, keeping an eye on the swimmers. The summer rolled on uneventfully until the 4th of July weekend hit. That day the club turned into a madhouse. Every member could bring one guest and the place was packed. Kids squealed, adults sipped cocktails by the lounge chairs, and the smell of chlorine mixed with the aroma of grilled burgers. I had no idea that day was about to flip my life upside down. Amid all the chaos he showed up, a middle-aged guy clearly not a regular. Tall, over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and at least 230 pounds of muscle and bulk. He wore loud Hawaiian swim trunks and had sunglasses perched on his head. His booming laugh carried over the pool as he headed for the diving board. I noticed Mr. Hansen, gray-haired guy who always bragged about his golf trophies, slap him on the back and say something pointing at the water. Looked like this was his guest. The guy started with simple jumps but quickly escalated to tricks. He was pulling off gainers, backflips off the low board, each one landing with a splash so big it sent water sloshing onto the concrete. His buddies cheered him on, and the kids at the shallow end giggled and pointed. I couldn't help but smirk. He definitely knew how to steal the show. But then things took a turn. He decided to go for one more jump, the flashiest yet. He took off running so hard the board shook, but at the very last second his foot slipped. His momentum was already set for the flip and he lost control. His body launched off the board, but his head, instead of tucking forward, snapped back and slammed into the edge of the diving board. That sound, dull, crunchy like someone snapping a thick branch, still echoes in my head. It hit me like a jolt of electricity. I froze in my chair, gripping the buoy, praying I wouldn't have to jump in. His body flopped into the water and started sinking, drifting slowly toward the bottom. I counted in my head, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. No movement. No bubbles, no thrashing. Just silence and dozens of eyes starting to turn my way. Damn it. 3 sharp blasts from my whistle signaled the other lifeguards that I'd need a neck board. I glanced at my partner, Tom, who was already sprinting for the equipment shed, and dove in. The water stung my face, but I tried to enter cleanly to avoid making waves. My training kicked in like autopilot. A dive down to 8 or 9 feet, murky water blurring my vision, and there he was, a limp figure in Hawaiian trunks. He was out cold, just floating in the depths like a mannequin. Big guy, but in the water his weight didn't feel so bad. I hooked my arms under his armpits, pulled him to the buoy, and pushed us both to the surface, keeping his head steady. By the pool's edge, Tom and another lifeguard, Kate, were waiting with the board. They lowered it into the water and we moved like a well-oiled machine. I aligned his body, they strapped him in, securing his neck and spine. Then they hauled the board up while I climbed out, dripping wet, hands shaking. I looked back, half a dozen stunned faces, mouths agape, some parents shielding their kids' eyes. Mr. Hansen stood there, pale as a ghost. Everyone was waiting for me to say or do something. Great. This was my show now. He wasn't breathing. I yelled, "Call an ambulance," and checked his chest. The board kept his neck still, standard protocol for a spinal injury, but without air he wouldn't make it to the medics. My 16-year-old brain made the call. Life overrules. I started CPR. Here's what they don't tell you: bones break. You feel ribs cracking under your palms, cartilage giving way with a snap. It's awful. I still wake up from nightmares about that feeling. 1 round, 30 compressions. Then 2 breaths mouth to mouth. His head was already tilted slightly from the board, so I didn't have to move his neck. After the 2nd breath I went back to compressions, and on the 5th or 6th he coughed. A little water dribbled from his mouth, he took a weak breath and his eyelids fluttered. Tom and Kate grabbed the board and rushed him to the shade, while I collapsed onto the concrete. My head buzzed like I'd been hit by a bell. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. Adrenaline flooded every inch of me and I just sat there, staring at the wet streaks on the ground. The whole thing took maybe 6 minutes, but it felt like I'd lived a lifetime in those seconds. Someone, Kate I think, tossed me a towel and helped me up. They led me to the lifeguard shack, where I sat wrapped in that towel until the manager, Mr. Donovan, came for me. He was my friend Jake's dad and the one who'd gotten me the job. We walked to the main club building, where members usually sipped cocktails and talked about their yachts. It was quiet now. Mr. Donovan sat me down at a table in the staff room. He was a big guy with bushy eyebrows and a voice that could calm anyone. "Tell me what happened," he said, sliding me a glass of water. I spilled it all, the jump, the hit, the dive, the CPR. My hands were still trembling as I signed some papers. Probably an incident report. He clapped me on the shoulder and sent me home. "Rest up, kid. You did good." I nodded and stumbled to my car, still in a daze. At home, I crashed on my bed and lay there for 3 hours before I even started processing what had happened. A couple of days later I was back on shift. Tom met me at the gate and said the guy was fine, they'd taken him to the hospital and he'd come to. Mr. Hansen caught me by the pool and thanked me so hard I thought he'd crush my hand. But I never saw the man himself again. It became a legend among the lifeguards, a story they'd tell newbies with a little extra flair. I was glad he'd made it and that my instincts had kicked in. But the story didn't end there. About a year later, I was finishing high school and thinking about college when Mr. Donovan mentioned the guy in passing. His name was Richard Keller and he wasn't just some random guest. Turns out he was a businessman from out of state, owned a construction company or something. Mr. Hansen was an old college buddy, and they'd decided to relive their glory days that 4th of July. After the incident, Richard vanished from the club. No calls, no visits. Mr. Donovan shrugged. He got weird after that. I nodded and let it go. Life moved on. College, my first real job, a move to a new city. Fate, it seems, had a few more tricks up its sleeve. 10 years later, in March 2025, I was sitting in a cafe near my apartment. It was a gray morning, rain tapping the windows, and I was scrolling the news on my phone, sipping coffee. Then I saw it. Millionaire Richard Keller donates $5 million to train lifeguards nationwide. There was a photo, and I nearly choked. It was him. Older, with gray hair and crow's feet around his eyes, but that same broad face and sharp gaze. The article said he'd survived a serious injury in his younger days that changed his outlook on life, and now he wanted to give back to those who risked themselves for others. I set my phone down and stared out the window. This was too weird to be a coincidence. At home, I dug deeper online. After the accident, he'd had 2 broken ribs, a mild concussion, and a mess of bruises, but his spine, miraculously, was fine. He'd spent 3 months in the hospital, then left the country. Some said Switzerland, others South America. When he came back, he sold off part of his company for a fortune and turned into a philanthropist. His name popped up in headlines, opening clinics, funding schools. And now Lifeguards. I sat at my laptop, rereading the article, feeling a mix of pride and some nagging unease I couldn't place. The next day a letter arrived. A plain white envelope, no return address, my name handwritten on the front. I tore it open, expecting a bill or junk mail, but inside was a note. "Thank you for giving me a second chance. Hope you're doing well. RK." And a check for $10,000. I sank onto the couch, holding the paper, my mind racing. How did he find my address? How did he even track me down? My heart started pounding again, just like that day by the pool. I called Jake, Mr. Donovan's son, who I still texted with now and then. He laughed when I told him. "Dude, that's insane." Then he added that a couple of months ago, some guy had come to the club asking about the lifeguard who pulled a man out of the water 10 years back. Jake gave him my old address, the one at my parents' place, and figured Richard must have tracked me from there. "He looked legit, suit and all, had a driver with him," Jake said. I thanked him and hung up, still reeling. But that wasn't the end. A week later, I decided to dig more into Richard Keller. On some random forum, I found an old thread where someone claimed they'd seen him in a small town up north. Said he'd bought a house there and lived quietly, almost like a hermit. Others chimed in that he'd gone a little mystic after the injury, got into meditation and philosophy. I didn't know what to believe, but one detail stuck. Someone mentioned he had a tattoo on his shoulder, a red buoy, a symbol of survival. I closed my laptop and sat in silence for a long time. It's been a few days since then and I still haven't decided what to do with the check. Cashing it feels wrong, but throwing it out doesn't either. Maybe I'll donate it to lifeguard training, in memory of the day my hands broke ribs but saved a life. It's still the wildest thing that's ever happened to me. Sometimes I wonder, what if I hadn't jumped? What if he hadn't coughed? And what's he doing now, out there somewhere with a buoy inked on his skin? I hope he's okay. And man, I hope he's done jumping off diving boards.